All right, joining me now is Khalil covering the Detroit Pistons for Locked On Pistons. Ku, thank you so much for hopping in. Really appreciate your Detroit coverage for this season, for this upcoming season.
I appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to talking about the Pistons, especially after their first preseason game. There's a lot to look forward to.
Hey man, this is a young team, an interesting team, lots of different layers to the prospects that are here. But I think we got to start with Cade, right? Like that's probably the most interesting factor for this team with his development right now, right?
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, everything's going to revolve around Cade. The Pistons are going to go as far as Cade takes them, whether that's another below 30-win season, a 30-plus win season, whatever it is. They're only going to go as far as Cade takes them. So yeah, he's definitely the biggest piece of all of this.
His development is, I think it's been controversial or at least polarizing from different perspectives. Like the efficiency people have talked about as being a little bit shaky, and then you miss basically all of last season with the injury. Where do you think he's at right now? How did he look in the first preseason game, and what do you think Detroit Pistons fans can expect this year?
I think Cade. I'm very high on Cade. I think Cade's going to be amazing. I think he's going to be great. Whether he's going to be great this season, we're obviously going to have to wait and see. But everything I've heard from his camp, I got to interview his brother earlier in the offseason. Everything I've heard from them, he's great. He's in great health. He's 100%. He was able to have a full offseason. The injury didn't impact any of his offseason stuff. He was able to go full throttle. And obviously, he played really well Team USA from everything we've heard. Obviously, these are just pickup runs, so don't read too much into any of them, but he's looked really good there. So I think he's going to have a really good year. In the first preseason game, kind of knocking some rust off, it felt like, taking a lot of jumpers. Didn't shoot very well from the floor. It was 5 of 15. Started to heat up a little bit in the third quarter, started to play pretty well. But it's a preseason game, and everyone stopped playing. Basically, I think like halfway through the third quarter, didn't play again after that. But the only thing with Cade, since we're talking about his efficiency, the only thing with Cade, I think the efficiency is a little bit overblown for what it's worth. I do think the pull-up three-point shooting has to come around, because that was like the biggest thing. One of the biggest things about him coming out of college is that he's this 6'7", 6'8" dude, playmaker, can get to the rim, and he can shoot from three when you go under screens. Like, if he's going to have to be able to shoot from three for sure for him to be what we all think he is. I think he's going to. But the only thing I will say about the efficiency stuff is that even in the first preseason game, now I think this has a lot to do with the makeup of a roster and what he's been given, which I hope kind of changes at some point this season. But he's kind of being forced into a tough shot diet, which I'd hope it improves. Taking a lot of mid-range shots. Now, last year, before he went down, he was one of the best pull-up mid-range shooters in the league. So I understand that's one of his. If you want to take mid-range shot, that's completely fine. Those who have that part of their game is big time, especially as a pick-and-roll threat.
Sure.
But you don't want your entire game to be relying on it too. So I'd like to see him take a little bit more shots at the rim, take a little bit more threes, and kind of balance out the mid-range shots. Not don't take them, just balance out a little bit more across the three levels. That's the only critique I have around his efficiency. I think that will help. But like I said, I think that has a lot to do as well with what he's being surrounded with on the court.
I think it's completely fair. Like, and especially with young guys, a lot of it is going to be context dependent, and you can't pigeonhole guys into what they're going to look like in their first year or two, just because there's so much that is like it's focused on the situation around them. And I look at the double bigs. I look at a lot of the rotations that, like, when Detroit is trying to, like, basically have them work in a phone booth and say, "Hey, we're gonna need you to create everything for this," and that's just a lot of pressure to put on a young guy. So, what is the direction that this team is going to take from maybe the starting lineup perspective? It sounds like they might be dropping down to one big a little bit more frequently.
I mean, that's the hope. I'm completely with you with this double big stuff. I've been very vocally against the double big stuff going all the way back to when they first tried it. The thing is, I know that Troy Weaver has spent a lot of time talking about, you want to match up with the bigger teams in the Eastern Conference. And one of the teams that always gets mentioned is the Cavs. And I don't understand why everyone keeps talking about the Cavs and the Pistons fan base and the Pistons community and those around the Pistons. Keep talking about the Cavs, like the Cavs, like this team that's made the finals and it's like the team to beat. That they just lost in the first round. Like, I don't think you should be crafting your team around, how are we going to beat those guys? Like, I don't think that's like how you should be building your team. Right. I do understand the size argument, but you also need to have the personnel to run the two bigs. And the Pistons just don't have those kind of versatile big men to make that work. So I think they're going to go less double big and kind of go to one big. Hopefully that would really help Cade. But to be honest, this is something that, this is something I'm talking about on the podcast now. And we'll probably be talking about over the next few weeks is that, playing Isaiah Stewart at the 4 in the starting lineup probably is still kind of doing the double big stuff because, even in the first preseason game, I talked about it all yesterday on the podcast. In the first preseason game, they'd run pick and rolls and have Stu in the corner, and Phoenix's defenders were just tagging so aggressively on the pick and roll that it was really taking away the role for Duren and any kind of driving lane for Cade, and they'd kick it out to Stu. And there's no percentage that Stu's going to be able to hit at that forces defenses to say, we don't want to give up a Stu 3. We'd rather deal with Cade and Duren and pick and roll. Like there's no percentage he can hit that's going to change that. And there's no percentage that's going to change whether the Pistons think that's an offense they're willing to deal with, willing to live with. So the starting lineup, I do think you may see Stu possibly go to the bench at some point. But yeah, the team needs to go with the one big, and they need to craft this team a little bit better around Cade this upcoming season if they want to really see him flourish, which I think he can.
And it seems like they've had at least pretty decent personnel to try that. Like Monte Morris coming in this year, Ausar Thompson coming in this year. There's some young guys and some smaller guys that, Cade's 6'7", 6'8", like you mentioned. The defense it'll drop off just a little bit, but the actual benefits that you could see from going a little bit smaller, I do think is very real. So tell me about Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, Marvin Bagley, James Wiseman, this collection of bigs. You mentioned Jalen Duren as the guy that everybody thinks, hey, you're going to build around him. Is he the big man of the future for this team?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Not even close. He's the center of the future for the Pistons. I think he's going to have multiple All-Stars in his future. I think he's going to be absolutely fantastic. This is a dude who I think is probably like 7 years away from what his prime is going to be. He's 19 years old. In 7 years, he's going to be like 25, 26. Like he's not even like, we're not even close to where his prime is going to be. That's how young this dude is. It kind of reminds me a little bit. Now they're not. They're a little bit similar as players, but it kind of reminds me of like Andre Drummond with the Pistons, where he was drafted at 18, and you didn't really see him hit his prime until he was like 24, 25, and that was like 7 years after he was originally drafted. I see the jokes all the time. It's like when Andre Drummond has a birthday, they're like, "Oh my God, this dude's only 30, only 29." I thought he was like 40 years old. But it's kind of gonna be like the same thing with Duren because of how young he is. He has such a long runway to develop and add so many things. But yeah, I think Duren's gonna be great. The big man rotation is just there's not outside of Jalen Duren, there's not a lot of versatility within the Pistons front court with those guys. Stu is the one trying to add some versatility, but again, I know it's just one preseason game, but it's exactly what I thought you would see and what we saw last year, which is you're really trying to force him into simply being a stretch big, and there's just not going to be a percentage that he can realistically shoot, that will make it work to a point where the spacing will be respected and everything flows correctly. Even in the first preseason game, you saw them try to run, which Monty has kind of talked about a little bit, and Troy Weaver's kind of talked about, Duren at the hub a little bit, try to run the offense to him at the high post, use his passing ability, which he's a really good passer. And there was a few times you saw him go the direction, the Suns would force him towards Stu's side, and Stu's just not versatile enough to come off a dribble handoff. Like that's nowhere near something he can do in this game. So it created a lot of clunkiness when the Suns would force him that way. Because Stu was like, "Oh, am I supposed to come around this? Do I do it?" And he'd come around it. Duren knows he can't do it, doesn't give it to him. Now you got 4 guys on one side, and it's just like it disrupts the entire spacing of the floor. But Stu, he does provide versatility defensively. He's a good switch defender, aggressive defender, and they are trying to get him to be a spacer at the floor. The other 2 guys, Bagley he's a bucket, that's for sure. He's a guy that there has to be some value to that. A dude that can come in and just score a point per minute, basically. Like he's going to come in and just score the basketball just by rolling to the rim, catching lobs, offensive rebounds, and dunking everything he can. And he did make a 3 a few days ago, so that's for what that's worth. But Bagley has his own deficiencies on the defensive side. He has a really good chemistry with Cade, Killian Hayes, hopefully he has it with Monty Morris, but he has a good chemistry with Cade, Jaden, Ivey, and Killian Hayes. And then when it comes to Wiseman, I think he's the odd man out. He just has so many things that he needs to work on and so many things he has to get better at. And he just does not fit, I think, with what they need out of a center with this team. So I think he's the odd man out. I don't want to spend too much time going at Wiseman because he has a very lively fan base, and they very much show up anytime you say anything. So don't want to go too far with it. Just I think he's probably going to end up being the odd man out.
It's a numbers game if we're being frank, and to me it seems like the right course of action eventually would be, hey, you build around Duren. Isaiah Stewart's like your perfect seventh or eighth man off the bench, somebody who can play next to him at times, but you don't want that to be your first punch, and then gives you that versatility with the second unit. But that's a question for another day. Tell me about the dynamic between Jaden Ivey and Ausar Thompson, because it seems like Ausar may want to start. Like, it seems like Ivey's going to want to start, and both of those guys probably view themselves as future stars in the league. How's that going to work?
I'd hope that they start all three of them together. I don't see why they wouldn't start Cade, Ausar, and Ivey together. But in this first preseason game, I know Ivey came off the bench, which was really shocking to Pistons fan base, even though James Edwards III of The Athletic, he kind of wrote twice over the last 2 weeks that was something that they were maybe considering. Jaden Ivey was asked about coming off the bench or starting, and he said the goal is just to win. And that, I know that's like kind of the QB answer, but before those articles, before he was asked that, if you would have asked me, is Jaden Ivey going to come off the bench, I would have said 100% not. Don't even entertain talking about it. So the fact that was something that was even being talked about already perked my ears. I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting that's something even being talked about right now.
Fair.
And he did end up coming off the bench in the first preseason game. I don't think that's something that's going to last. I think they're going to probably start him when the season comes around. I think that they're choosing the wrong person to bring off the bench. If they are trying to pick one, it should be Stu. I think they should bring off the starting lineup should be Cade, Ivey, Ausar, Bojan, and Duren. If they want to start Ausar Thompson, which he looked really good in the first preseason game. I love Ausar. He was I loved him. He was in my top 5 when I was doing draft coverage. I loved him and his brother. I think his brother is going to be a superstar, but I love Ausar. So I think he's going to be good enough to start immediately, simply because I believe in some of his skill sets, but also because there's no other wing on the Pistons team that has any kind of functionality when it comes to the defensive end outside of Ausar, and you need that. And his athleticism is just a needed jolt to the team. I think those two can play together, and I think they should be playing together. If they don't start together, I still think you're going to see them close with them. I think you'll see stretches throughout the game with them playing together. I'd be shocked if they don't start together, but even when Ivey didn't start that preseason game, you got long stretches when it was Killian Hayes, Ivey, and Ausar playing together. So I don't think they're never going to play together, even if he doesn't start. But I'd honestly be shocked if they don't start together.
We'll see how it breaks out. There's a lot of questions. I do think that, given the number of questions and given the number of uncertainties with kind of the direction that the offense versus the defense and the big man dynamic wants to go, I still have this team only winning 25 games, despite the fact that they have more talent than that. I think it's clear. I believe in Cade. I think that he's going to be fantastic. I still have some questions about the rest of the development and the direction that that's going to go. But I think that Cade is a great long-term piece, and it's really about who is going to join him. Where do you see this team finishing?
This is the problem is that last year, do I think that they were a bottom 3 team? Yes, I think they were going to be a bottom 3 team no matter what happened. But I don't think they were 17 wins bad if Cade would have played. I think they probably would have hovered around like 21, 22 wins, which again is not good. You're still probably one of the worst. Would that have been the worst team in the league still, 21, 22 wins? I think it might have.
It's about right. Like I think San Antonio was about there too.
Yeah, so you still would have been one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the league. You just wouldn't have been 17 wins bad, which is why I bring that up to say I think they should be able to reach 32 wins. Looking at 17 to 32, a 15-win jump for a young team is pretty huge. My argument is that they actually wouldn't be really making a 15-win jump because they were actually like a 21, 22-win team if Cade played. So then you'd really be looking at like a 10-win jump, which still is a pretty big jump. I know their over-under is 28.5 with FanDuel. Would I be spending my money to bet the over? No, I would. I'd keep my money in my pocket. should the players in the team be thinking they can reach 32? Yes, that should be the goal for them, at least 32 wins. It's going to be hard because the East did not get worse. And a lot of the teams that we thought maybe would blow it up did not blow it up, in like Chicago and Toronto and teams like that. So it's going to be tough to do so. But that should be the goal within, for sure. But I don't see this team, like, if I had to take a guess, and like my educated guess, I'd say, I mean, they probably finished bottom 3 again in the East, and they're just more competitive this year. Like, maybe they're not just straight awful, but like, they shouldn't be just awful, but I just can't see them jumping too many teams in the East because no one really like decided to, hey, we're just going to blow it up and go to the bottom of the rankings. Like, there's a lot of teams that said, hey, we're okay with like being in this middle ground. That didn't really get worse, and that kind of impacts the Pistons a little bit. So I know Pistons fans don't want to hear this. If any of them listen, I'm sorry. Look, I want to see them win a lot of games too, but it's just going to be tough. Cade, I'll say this. Last thing I'll say about it is this. When I watch Cade highlights and watch his best games, I have a little devil on my shoulder that says, "Coup, bet the over. They're going to win 35 games. Do it." Every time I have a little devil on my shoulder that says it, but I have to. I can't do that.
Hey, I mean, who knows? I mean, sometimes if a star develops before your eyes, it changes the trajectory of a group. And maybe Cade is that guy. I think there's at least enough general questions that it may not happen immediately. And coming off of basically a full season loss, it may take him some time and the team might start pretty bad. So I think there's reason to both have some faith and also to have some skepticism here. But give me one bold prediction on your way out.
Bold prediction. Cade wins most improved player.
Ooh, there we go. I love that. That's the and he is the exact kind of guy that you're looking to win that 3rd-year jump. A little bit shaky, and then had the missed time. Obviously, I could see 23, 7-7, something like that for him. That would be awesome.
That's basically what I'm projecting for him. 23, around 23, 6-6, 7, like somewhere around there. I think that's something he definitely can achieve.
Well, here's to it, man. He is Khalil, covering Detroit for the Locked On Pistons podcast. Make sure to go follow his work at Khalil. Thank you so much, my guy. We will chat again soon, and good luck this year.
Appreciate you, man.